Hello, guys, and welcome back to today's podcast. So, last time we explored the Islamic Golden Age literature tradition in Islamic culture and how oral narratives help preserve and transmit cultural knowledge. But in this episode, we're moving to a slightly different but equally fascinating territory. We'll be discussing the way in which folklore and myth continue to shape the narratives of contemporary Asian authors. So, how do these time honored tradition inform and enrich modern storytelling in places like China, India, Japan, and even beyond? And how can we bring these insights into the classrooms? So, stay tuned with us as we dive into this rich tapestry of Asian literature. And I'm your host, Rani, from English Literature student, and joining me today are Defitri Ramadhani, an English linguistic student, and Nahda Embun, an English cultural studies student. So thank you for being here, guys.
Thank you, Rani, for having us today. Happy to be here.
Same here. It's going to be fun today.
Well, if you've ever wondered about how ancient stories shape the way modern authors write, you're in the right place. So, but let's get on the same page first. Folklore involves the beliefs, customs, and stories that is handed down over generations. While myths often wrestle with those grand existential questions like how the world began or why we exist. And these elements are like a cultural toolkit. It's like a set of lenses that helps us understand the present by looking and peering into the past. But Defitri, could you help us break down why folklore and myth are very important in Asian writing?
Sure, Rani. So, in many parts of Asia, folklore and myths aren't just old stories stored away. So, they are still alive and important until today. Writers often use them to talk about identity, culture, and social issues. And these stories act like a framework to discuss things like the effects of colonialism or current political problems. So when authors include these old tales in new works, it feels like the past and present are having a conversation, helping readers see how history influences life today.
Mm.
Exactly. These old stories are, are not just about tradition. In fast-changing societies, they show the tension between staying true to roots and adapting to the modern world. And writers often ask, how do we evolve without losing who we are? And this is a question many Asian cultures connect with.
Right, precisely. So now let's take a look at some concrete examples, right? The Wine Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami it's often very cited for its subtle use of Japanese folklore. Devi, could you help us? What do you think about Murakami tap into that tradition?
So for Murakami, I think he doesn't directly retell a specific folktale straight up. Instead, he includes elements of folklore like magical wells, shaman-like journeys, and surreal landscapes that feel like they've stepped out of old legends. The main character, Toru Okada, in that story, enters a world where myth and reality mix together. These details allow Murakami to explore deep emotional and historical pain in an indirect way. The folklore-inspired setting helps readers connect with Japan's shared memories, including the impact of war.
Yep, I think that's what makes Murakami work timeless. He blends ancient ideas, then using it to shed light on very modern anxieties like urban isolation, the search of meaning, and the long shadow of history.
Absolutely. And that symbol of why a bird feels like a distant echo of ancient stories, right? It's like it's whispering that there's more to life than what we see on the surface. But now let's shift into India. The God of Small Thing by Arundhati Roy. Uh, People often, see Roy that she integrates Indian mythology in a subtle but powerful way. Nasha, how do you think she does that?
I think Lloyd does not just mention gods or legends.
Um,
He uses storytelling styles like circular timelines and poetic language to bring myth alive. It's her way to celebrating Indians' culture while questioning things like caste and gender roles. She shows myths are not just old stories, they are still shaping life in India today.
Yes, so exactly. Roy's work shows that mythology can feel both familiar and challenging. It reminds us that old stories can support the way things are, but also question them. So in her writing, these mythical elements makes us wonder like which tradition should we keep and which should we reconsider, something like that.
Now that you mention it and I hear it directly, that's a really great point. But now I'm wondering, from Chinese side, let's talk about Moyan's big breast and white hips, which is a very unique title. And this book is a very long and a complex one. This book is really infused into Chinese folklore. But I'm wondering, how does Moyans achieve this infusion, Defitri?
So I think for how Moyen achieved that plan is that Moyen uses China's folklore not just for decoration, but as a key part of how his characters see the world. It's part of their everyday lives, showing up in mentions of legendary figures or the values shaping family relationships.
Mm-mm.
And this folklore allows Moyen to examine political events, the changes of the 20th century, and conflicts between generations. He creates a blend of personal struggles and national history, and all tied to China's ancient myths. His message is clear. It's like to understand modern China, you need to understand the stories it still held onto.
Yep, and that's why it resonates. Folklore is not just for tradition, it's a way to understand how stories still shape identity and value today.
That's a great insights, guys. Well, from the past few minutes, we've already discussed examples from Japan, India, and China, and it really gave us a glimpse of some of breadth of Asian literature, right? But of course, Asia is very fast and it's very broad, so we have to broaden our scope and consider another author. Say, let's say from Southeast Asia. You guys, many readers might be familiar with him. So, Pramudya Anantatur. Have you guys heard of him?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I've heard
Mm.
about him.
Right? He's, of course, from our country, Indonesia. And Nahda, can you help us tell a bit about how he incorporates these local folklore or historical oral traditions into his works.
So Pramudia Anantatur, especially in the buku quartet, mixes Indonesian history with oral storytelling. While he often noted for his political commentary and portrayal of Indonesian struggles against colonialism, he also treats through local beliefs, proverbs, and legends to show the character struggles and resilience. Folklore becomes a way to reflect on being Indonesian after colonialism, connecting today's challenges to history.
Yes, so in Pramudia's stories, you can feel how history and tradition heavily influence the characters. Even as they fight for political and social change, they are often guided or even troubled by the past. So this highlights that shaping a nation's future often means confronting its oldest stories.
Right, and I've read some of his book, and his book is really a mirror to our. It's like we see our history in his books, right? And we've talked about Pramudiana Thakur, our an author from our own country, and he and that's adds another great insights for us, right, guys? Well,
Yes, that's right.
not just for us, but especially for educators. And so let's bring that back to the classrooms. Before we already have discussed some ideas already, but we need to expand that more. Um, I'm wondering about how can educators effectively integrate these insights into their teaching practices, especially given that we have in the world we have such a variety of cultural contexts and narrative styles. It is sometimes maybe very overwhelming and maybe very confusing. So, Nahda, what do you think? And do you have another approach educators can try?
Well, educators might consider thematic units that center on folklore's role in shaping identity. For instance, you could have a reading list that pair a chapter from Murakami with a short story from Pramudia, and ask students to identify similar folkloric themes like journeys, spirits, or moralism, and how they are adapted for modern contexts. By comparing authors from different countries, students learn that folklore is not monolithic. It shows how folklore adapts to different cultures and times.
Oh, yes, and also teachers may use multimedia to make learning more engaging, right? So students could watch short documentaries about myths, listen to recordings of traditional storytelling, or even explore artwork inspired by folklore. So I think this approach helps them understand folklore better and suits different learning styles. It also shows them that folklore is a living, evolving part of culture and not just something found in books.
Wow, that's a great suggestion, guys. And I can already imagine how useful those ideas will be, especially when the world is now very integrated in advanced technology, and we cannot ever forget our tradition, our folklore, and our myths, and because that shapes who we are today. So, what about pushing students to connect these tales, folklores, and myths to contemporary issues in their own communities?
Exactly, Rani. Educators can have students research a local myths or folktale for their own cultural background, and then write a short essay or produce a creative project comparing it to what they've seen in Murakami or Roy. This encourages students to see parallel and contrast. How do their own tradition grapple with questions of identity or morality?
Mm.
This kind of cross-cultural comparison can help students become global thinkers.
Right. And don't forget that critical discussions are important too, right? A student can explore questions like who benefits from keeping these myths alive and who might be left out because of them. And these questions and these insights encourage a deeper understanding, and myths and folklore can help support certain social systems while pushing others aside. And it makes them a great tool for teaching critical thinking and cultural awareness too. Wow, guys, I really love how this suggestion move beyond simple literary analysis and help a lot of students engage more deeply into the text and themselves and their own folklore and myth in their country, right? And for educators looking for integrate technology, they can consider online forums or class blogs where students can share their findings, debate interpretations, and even interview family members about old stories passed down at home from generations to generations, right? And this these ideas will turn literature class into a cultural exchange that's both personal and academic.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Students could make short podcasts linking a folk tale to modern novel, combining tradition with today's technologies.
Mhm.
Yes, so if I may add, another approach is to invite guest speakers, maybe like cultural historians or local elders, to talk about how myths have changed over time. So this shows that students that folklore isn't just stuck in the past, it's alive and continues to evolve with every new generation.
Ooh, that's that's a great idea. Another addition, thank you, Defitri. But now it's time for us to wrap up. So now for a few minutes now, we've covered a lot, right? From Murakami's surreal echoes of Japanese folklores, Roy's mythic lenses on India's society, Moyan's rich tapestry of Chinese traditions, and also Pramudya's Indonesian narrative heritage. And we also explored how these authors use ancient stories not just as backdrops that in the background, but as an active agents that helps shape themes, characters, and also commentary, and that can help us into ideas, practical teaching for educators into practical classroom strategies, right? Comparison across culture, multimedia resources, creative projects, and engagements, and of course critical discussion, and all that's all to make folklore feel more alive and also relevant. And by recognizing that myths and folklores are not just a passive remnants but active ingredients in modern storytelling, both readers and students can help develop a richer understanding of how literature can connect to a wider cultural, political, and historical currents, guys, right?
Exactly. So I agree with you, Rani, that the past isn't something we leave behind. So it walks alongside us, influencing how we interpret the world and the stories we tell.
Yes, totally agree. Once students see this, they will read beyond the text and explore the culture behind it.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end this on. Wow, thank you so much, Defitri and Nahda, for sharing your insights and helping us understand more on the ongoing power of folklore and myth in contemporary Asian literature. And I hope our listeners will be inspired to explore these words and maybe even bring some of these ideas alive into their classrooms. So stay tuned, guys, for our listeners. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll be continuing our literary journey around the world. We'll be traveling on the writings all over the world. So until then, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep discovering how ancient stories still speaks up on who we are today. So
Yes, so thank you very much for having us, Rani. I'm really enjoying today's talk.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Can't wait for our next talk.
yes, thank you guys. See you next.
Bye.